Welcome to the Mexpreneurs Podcast, the podcast about the stories of Mexican tech startup founders who are building world-class, fast-growing companies and having a positive impact at a large scale. My name is Sergio Chavez. I'm a Mexican based in Germany, a tech startup founder, executive, and mentor, and your host. Today we have Marc Freudenberg with us. Marc is founder and CEO of the Uncommon Lab, a material science startup based in Guadalajara, Mexico. The Uncommon Lab develops innovative B2C products that apply scientific principles from tribology and material sciences. It is a spin-off of the Interlub Group, a leader in specialized industry lubricants founded in 1984 by Marc's dad, Peter Freudenberg. The Uncommon Lab brings Interlub experience to consumer markets. Since its launch, it has seen strong traction in Mexico, primarily via Baking Alchemy, a non-stick baking and cooking product. It has achieved nearly 100,000 followers on social media, partnered with over 100 distributors throughout the country, and won awards such as Empresas Excepcionales. Marc is originally from Guadalajara, Mexico. Due to his German and Mexican family, he has spent significant time in both Germany and Mexico studying economics and business in Hamburg and Berlin. After gaining valuable experience working at fast-growing German startups, Marc returned to Mexico to apply his knowledge in the family business. He later took over the role of general manager of the metal forming division of Interlub and founded the Uncommon Lab. He is passionate about entrepreneurship and international business, which is reflected in the creation of new businesses and the global expansion that Interlub is experiencing. I hope you enjoy. Support for this episode comes from Skyflare, a cybersecurity company with a mission to make e-commerce safe for online shops and which currently protects dozens of Shopify-based businesses through its 360 degrees holistic protection. As an online shop owner, you know that every cent you spend in online advertisement counts, especially in Google AdWords. Therefore, keeping a tight control of your budget and the ROI are essential. Nevertheless, there are bad actors out there who can make those costs explode. Skyflare's Click Fraud Protection Solution helps you prevent and resolve those threats. At Mexpreneurs, we had the privilege to have Skyflare's founders in the podcast, including Juan Ocampo, a Mexican tech startup founder, and Skyflare's Chief Operations Officer. Visit skyflare.com/mexpreneurs to learn more and also to get a 10% discount during your first 3 months of your annual subscription. Skyflare is at the moment available in Europe, Mexico, and Canada through the Shopify App Store. Hello, Marc. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Sergio. Nice to hear you.
Thank you very much for joining us, Marc. So, Marc, please tell us, who is Marc Freudenberg?
That's a good question. Maybe I'll start by giving a bit of my background. I'm from Mexico. I'm from Guadalajara, and I'm from a German-Mexican family. So I have always been in connection with Germany. I've lived there twice as a kid, 2 years. Once when I was in primary school and then in secondary school. Afterwards, I went to study to Germany. I studied in Hamburg, in Berlin, also in other cities in Europe. My background has been always this connection between Germany and Mexico. So this is something I have always very present in me and basically in my personality. I studied economics and business afterwards, actually both in Germany, once economics in the University of Hamburg, and business in a European business school that's called ESCP Business School in Berlin, Paris, and Madrid. I have been in good connection with Europe, but after 9 years of living in Europe, I came back to Mexico. So I'm living here in my hometown again in Guadalajara. Very beautiful city, a bit chaotic as Mexico, but very interesting. Currently, I'm working on a couple of things. One is I'm working at the Uncommon Lab. That is B2C business that we built within the group of our family company. And I have another job at the family company that's called Interlub Group, where I'm leading one of the commercial divisions that's called metalworking. We're basically distributed into many industries, and one of the important industries is metalworking. So we're pushing also very hard on that side, on globalizing our company. I'm also currently starting a new job as a professor in Tec de Monterrey in international business. That's just a couple of hours a semester. But yeah, I'm excited to be doing that also. I'm kind of distributed in different topics. Sometimes I'm getting a bit crazy because of the time. So we need to prioritize sometimes, and that's difficult. But basically, that's kind of what I'm doing.
From what you mentioned, also from your family story, you've been on the move since being a child between Mexico, Germany, and you were mentioning Hamburg. Why exactly is it that you landed in Hamburg in the first place?
My father was German, so he moved to Mexico. He worked for a German company, that he moved to Mexico, and then he founded Interlub Group afterwards. But as being German, he always wanted to have a good connection with Germany. And me and my two brothers, we always were traveling as a kid to Germany. We always were frequently there. We have also family there, and we spent some time there. One of the things that my father always liked to do is to foster this connection with Germany. And also, we went to the German school here in Guadalajara, which also makes an important connection. So I moved to Hamburg. The actual reason is because one of my brothers lived there. So when I graduated from high school here in Mexico, I said, okay, I want to go to Germany. Where should I go? Okay, Hamburg. My brother lives there. So let's go to Hamburg. And that's why I joined the University of Hamburg. There was not like a big market research or whatever. I just went to Hamburg and got into the university, and that's it. I started studying there. I don't know if it's a difficult topic, but economics in German was a bit of a challenge, I would say, at the beginning. The university system in Germany is like, it's not like the school in Mexico. You're free to go or not to the lectures. It was kind of interesting story. And I finished studying in Hamburg, but then I wanted to travel to other cities. I didn't want to stay just in one city. So that's why I joined the ESCP Business School. That for me is super attractive because I could study business, but also get to know really interesting cities, Madrid, Paris, and Berlin. So that was part of the decision. That's why I was moving around. I finished my studies in Berlin and I stayed for about 4 years in Berlin.
And from what I understand, actually, in Berlin, you also gained some really good experience working at startups, working at different types of businesses. Could you walk us through what was exactly what you were doing in Berlin after your studies?
After finishing business, there was like the big decision. I didn't want to go back to the family company like immediately because I wanted to gain experience also outside, which was also something very important for company and for a family, that the family members gain experience from other parts that can be of value to the organization. There's just basically two things you can do in Berlin. You work as a startup or you work in government. Government was too boring for me. So I looked for startups. I joined at that time the most popular incubator, Rocket Internet, 2014, 13, 14, something like this. That was super interesting story. I stayed there for about 2 years, something like this, at one of their ventures, Helpling, that's I think still running. So I was there, and then I was at two other startups also in my time in Germany. One is Deliveroo, that I think they are not active in Germany anymore. And the other one is Amorelli, which is also a whole other topic, but it's also very interesting with very interesting value proposition.
You basically went from Hamburg to then moving to Berlin, having this opportunity to travel across different cities, then going through different startups in Berlin. But then you actually decided to move back to Mexico. What exactly was that reason for moving back to Mexico?
Basically, what my thinking was is I could stay in Germany and whatever, but I didn't want to work for someone. I was like, I'm working for these guys, really interesting work and so on, but I would like to do something on my own or also support the family organization because Interlub Group is becoming this year 40 years old. The company is having a lot of history already. I decided that maybe my best support would be to give that time and to give the value to the organization because we already had something built. And I thought, okay, it makes sense to provide more value and maybe some of the insights that we gain from the startup world into a very, let's say, traditional industry. Interlub Group is selling lubricants to heavy industry, very traditional industries with, I would say, little innovation, steel, mining, glass, aluminum. These are industries that are like fundamental to the world, but the processes themselves have not changed in maybe 80 years. So we're moving in a very traditional industry, but can we implement some of these startup elements and some of the speed? That's what I like. Some of the proposals, some of the energy of the startups to this type of industries. That was kind of the decision making process. And also, I started missing Mexico.
Those are already two compelling reasons to go back to Guadalajara. We will be right back for a conversation with our guest. Support for this episode comes from Partnership Leaders, the leading community of partnership professionals and executives in SaaS and tech with over 1,500 members globally. We're living in the decade of the ecosystem, and every CEO needs to become a partnership leader. Just take a look at the top companies in the world today like Microsoft, Google, and Apple. They have all become platform companies, and partnership executives in IT have been the ones leading these transformations. Partnership Leaders brings these executives together and is building a playbook to enable CEOs and business leaders across industries to transform their organizations into platform companies. If you're a tech startup founder, Partnership Leaders is the place for you to learn how to leverage partnerships to take your business to the next level. I'm a member of PL and co-host of the Germany chapter and have seen firsthand the richness and value of this incredible community. Visit partnershipleaders.com to learn more and to apply to become a member. Make sure to mention in your application that Mexpreneurs referred you so you can receive a special price if your application is accepted. But now, what was exactly your trajectory? So you went into the family business. What was your trajectory from that point onwards inside the family business?
Since I came back, I'm working on this division that I'm mentioning, which is the metalworking division. That's a division that's growing a lot. We're pushing to have a very strong presence in Mexico, but we're already in many other countries. We're about, I think, more than 10 countries already in our division. So I was in this like traditional business, but also trying to put some of the entrepreneurial energy and some of the international business experience that I gained, the two things I like most, entrepreneurship and international business. So try to push that, but we're building on something that's already existing. Let's say we're kind of building something better, something stronger, something more global, but on some industries that we already dominate. We thought, since we have an innovation lab in our company, in the group, and we have many researchers that know about chemistry, biotech, nanotech, etc., we thought, okay, we're very strong in industry. That's our core business. That's what we have done for the last couple of decades, and we've been successful in there. But can we use these capabilities and these technologies for consumer goods? That's the idea of the Uncommon Lab. And we found it in the pandemic, actually, the Uncommon Lab, which was a maybe good or bad decision, I don't know. But that's what happened. In the pandemic, we founded the Uncommon Lab because I had this idea already. The idea was already there that we could use the technologies that we have developed for the industry for the consumer goods. And why did we think that? Because there's many successful examples of this type of innovation that happen in the industry and that go to the consumer goods. Teflon that goes on the ovens was invented by DuPont, but for isolating nuclear waste or nuclear transmissions. That was an innovation done for another application, but ended up in the kitchen. You know, the shoes, the foamy technology that we use in the normal running shoes, that was developed by NASA for the boots for going to the moon. These kind of examples are very interesting because many of these industry innovations end up in consumer goods. And that's what we're trying to do. That's why we founded the Uncommon Lab. That's the other project I've been working on the last couple of years. It has been very interesting. I wouldn't say it's a bigger challenge. It's a different challenge because on the existing business, we're building, we're expanding, we're pushing the boundaries, maybe going internationally. That's the complexity because there are different challenges. For the Uncommon Lab, the challenge is to build a meaningful product and to build a meaningful brand. And that's a super different challenge. But I like it. It's very interesting. And I like also this creative part, not just the execution side, but also the creative part and building the business plan, thinking about the brand. What's your message? What's the product? What's your value proposition? That's also really interesting.
And what you mentioned that you had this idea from long ago before this transition from Interlub moving from B2B to B2C. Was that something that you already had in mind when you decided to move from Berlin to Guadalajara? At which point in time did that idea started popping up?
It started before moving to Mexico because I saw, for example, while working at the startups, I saw the e-commerce, this side of things, how e-commerce moves, how consumer goods can be really, really successful if you build good products. I already had this idea before coming to Mexico, and I think it was maybe one year before moving to Mexico that I had the idea. But when I moved to Mexico, it still was a concept, and we started building actually with some interns the first ideas. And the first ideas, we had three ideas. And we're still working on idea one, actually. We have two more ideas that we want to execute on, but you have to find the time. You have to building a brand is a challenge that I was not expecting to be as complex as it is, but it takes time. If you really want to build meaningful brand, and you can see this when you investigate brands, it takes a couple of years to actually be successful. Even the brands that you think are kind of new are maybe 10 years old, then have like this huge impact. But we're building the brand step by step. We're successful in social media, successful for us, right? For Nike, this is not successful, but for us, we have in our social media in Baking Alchemy, that's one of the products that we have in Uncommon Lab. We have around 100,000 followers in Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. This year, around 7 million people we have reached with our message. So this is very important for us. Building the brand from a digital standpoint is one of the core strategies that we have, because as a new brand, you have basically two options: go digital or go, brick and mortar, go to traditional publicity. And that's so expensive. And that's what I think new brands need to build their brands on digital sites. Even if you don't sell digitally, you at least have to build a brand there if you want to compete against the big guys.
And also, you were mentioning that you had this idea of the Uncommon Lab before moving back to Guadalajara, but then you went back, started working in the metal division. But what was that event that happened that is like, okay, now we need to start working on the Uncommon Lab with these interns that you mentioned? What was that trigger that led you into taking that step into starting to build the Uncommon Lab?
Basically, it was at that point, it was just before the pandemic, like a couple of months before. We had some programs working with Tec de Monterrey, some internship programs. So you always have like a project, and they say, "Hey, do you have a project for the interns to work on?" Then I said, "Okay, I have this project. I'm putting these guys. Maybe some interns want to join." And then we started with different groups, like it was two or three groups that started working on this project. I remember that one of the groups said, "Okay, do you actually want to do this? Is this just a concept, or are you putting money into this? Like, is this going to happen?" And then I started reflecting and said, "Okay, can we actually do this? Is this actually feasible?" And then we started just prototyping. Some of the elements that took more time was the prototyping of the products. That's not so easy. Like, you really need to spend time on that. So basically, with these internship programs, step by step, we were moving into that direction. And then at the pandemic, we decided we need to do this because we had at that time also a different technology that we developed for COVID, which was sanitizers with nanotechnology. You could put, at that time, you wanted to wash your hands all the time. And so we created a cream that protected you for a long time against virus for many hours with nanotech. We put Baking Alchemy and AXL, which was the other brand, and launched the Uncommon Lab. And that's how it happened. It was kind of a chaotic environment. It was not very straightforward, but that was kind of what was happening. And AXL was super successful while we had COVID. And when COVID ended, the business ended. In that process, we already had another brand that was Baking Alchemy, and we had also a team built. So we shifted and we pivoted to just focusing on developing Baking Alchemy.
But also, I can imagine that making the shift from the, let's say, core product that you have at Interlub with lubricants for industry, turning it into basically a consumer product for baking. That transition from moving that technology, creating a product basically for human consumption is a significant challenge and a significant leap that needs to be done. It's probably not that easy to be done like from one day to the other.
Sounds like a big leap, but it's actually not that big of a leap because in the lubricant industry, we serve also the food industry. So the food industry needs also lubricants and release agents. And this product that's based on the Baking Alchemy is a product that was originally developed for industrial bakery in Mexico. So what we saw is this industrial bakery, it's called Pan Bueno, which is a big, all the farmacias Guadalajara here in the region have the Pan Bueno bread. So we developed that product for them for a massive production. But what we said is, okay, we have this product, but how many bakers do exist in Mexico? It's like over 100,000. It's crazy. It's a lot of people do bakery in Mexico, and this product works for all bakers. Instead of focusing on these 3 or 4 big industrial bakeries like Bimbo and Pan Bueno and so on, let's go to the bottom of the market and let's go to this hundred thousands of bakers and try to push the product there. That was the leap from industry to, let's say, this consumer goods.
That's super interesting. But still, like putting the different pieces of the puzzle together, it was a big challenge. And of course, well, we'll talk about that more in detail in the following episode, but that's incredible. Mark, you're shifting gears in terms of your international connection, because now you went from being between Germany, Mexico, Germany, now being back in Mexico. But now what's still your connection, let's say, abroad? You mentioned that with Interlub, you have customers in multiple markets, but what is that exposure that you're having now based back in Mexico?
So based in Mexico, we're at the Interloop business. We're pushing some of the segments because we're kind of divided by segments, by different business units. So each business unit has its own logic because we're dependent on the market. So we adapt to the market, what the market asks us. In the division that I'm leading, what we're seeing is that we have a very big potential in Mexico locally. Obviously, this is a market that's priority for us to still dominate the market here. But we have 2 other international markets that are very interesting for us. One, which is kind of the most obvious, which is the US. And Europe is actually even more important than the US for us. Why? Because Europe has some interesting characteristics in our industries. One is that you have obviously many countries and many big industries, just like Germany, but you can also go to France. For example, the concentration of industries that you have in the northern parts of Italy is super heavy. Spain is also quite relevant. Portugal, what we're seeing in our industries is Turkey. Turkey is having a very important moment in terms of industrial growth. Eastern Europe, we have many big markets that are very interesting. This is one. And the other is for us as a lubricant company, it's very important to work with the producers of the machines. And the most important producers of machines for different industrial processes are based in Europe. So this is also the second strategic point that we need to focus on Europe, because from Europe we go global. That's kind of the connection that we're trying to foster. Unfortunately, for example, in Mexico, we don't have any machine producers. So we need to focus on these foreign markets and to have a good relationship there. Basically, I'm traveling to Europe relatively frequently, to the US also, and within Mexico. That's the international exposure. I always try to go to Germany. Every time I can, I go to Germany because I visit friends. You know, I like being there.
And you're also combining, well, the two main interests or passions that you mentioned, entrepreneurship and international business. Mark, unfortunately, we're reaching the end of our conversation, but what I would love to hear from you is your best advice for other aspiring founders. I think you have a great career trajectory, especially how you created the Uncommon Labs, and we'll talk in the next episode more in depth about it. But what would be your best advice for aspiring founders that would like to do something similar to what you've done so far?
I don't know if this advice is for everyone. This has worked for me or for other industries, maybe. But I think it's really, really, really important to focus on what's the niche that you're attacking. Because I made this mistake at the beginning when we founded Uncommon Lab. We tried to reach everyone, and this is not successful. At the beginning, it's still more important, even at the beginning, because at the beginning, you want to go to all the markets because you want to grow. But then what you need to do is the contrary. And I read this book of Seth Godin, and he had this concept that said the minimum viable market. And I would just advise everyone that's doing a business, even if the business is already successful, you really need to focus on your minimum viable market and to have the best value proposition there. And then this will lead you to grow better with the customers that you actually want. I made this mistake a couple of times. Even if I read the book before, I still didn't follow the advice. So this would be my advice.
But then those are the type of learnings that you get with practice and a reinforcement with the actual experience. Mark, well, thank you very much for your time. Fantastic conversation. And of course, looking forward to the next episode. But in the meantime, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you very much, Sergio, for inviting me.
Thank you, Mark. Have a good day.
You too.
And thanks to you for joining us today. Please remember to subscribe via your favorite podcast app to be notified about new episodes and share with us your feedback. We would love to hear from you. Thank you also to the Mexpreneurs team, Valeria Morel, Hector Barragan from Hyper Voltage, Francisco Jaimes, Pamela Elizalde, Katia Cruz, Rocío Marroquín. I am Sergio Chavez. See you next time.